The following is an interview with Jellybean Green ASMR. She's been doing ASMR on YouTube full-time for 10 years.
We have our excellent wine.
We get into her business and the finances of her career. I want to start off by you introducing yourself, your name, your channel, and what is it that you do for a living?
Okay, my name is Lola, and I create ASMR videos on YouTube under the pseudonym Jellybean Green. My channel is Jellybean Green ASMR.
And how long have you been doing that?
Over 9 years now.
What got you started in doing that?
I was a pretty much nightly viewer of ASMR videos for about 2.5 years at that point. And I was going through a period of significant life transition. I had split from my husband, and I was without a really significant job at that point. Like, I was doing some side work. I wasn't making enough money to really take care of me and my child on my own at that point. So I was looking for work, and I was also sort of looking for ways to reconnect with myself, with which I think is something a lot of people go through at the end of a long-term relationship, when you're trying to rediscover who you are without the context of being in that relationship. And as someone who has a past in performance and enjoying risks and creative risks, ASMR was still pretty unknown at that point. It's a lot more popular and well-known now. You're much more likely now to run into people who have heard of ASMR than you
And
were back
TikTok
then.
and stuff.
Yeah. But back then it was still kind of the early days of ASMR. And it was kind of considered so strange and unusual by a lot of people that back then, a lot of the people who made ASMR videos wouldn't even show their face because they were worried about there being like work conflicts or things like that. So it can be easy for people today to forget that, a decade ago, making ASMR videos on YouTube, by most people's standard, was a very weird, risky thing to do, which I think was exactly what I was looking for at that point. So I decided to try my hand at making some ASMR videos, see what happened, and it just took off, and I fell in love with it.
So what made you stumble upon ASMR in the first place?
My sister introduced me to it. So one of the interesting things about ASMR is, if you talk to people who get ASMR, a really common thing
What does
people
that
will
mean? Getting ASMR.
autonomous sensory meridian response. It sounds kind of scientific and official, which I think was the intention when someone originally came up with it. It's a more of a pseudoscience term. It's basically something someone made up, 12 years ago or whenever, to make it seem like a legit official phenomenon, which it was, but it wasn't really being scientifically studied at that point like it is now. ASMR is kind of has two meanings. Its primary meaning is that it's a feeling. It's this feeling of safety and comfort and relaxation, and it's usually characterized by this tingling sensation that for most people starts in the scalp and kind of runs down the spine. It can sometimes go into the limbs, but it's just very comforting. It's this very comforting feeling. So ASMR can also just refer to ASMR content, ASMR videos, ASMR audios. So it
So your
sort of
sister
means both.
introduced you to it.
Yes. My sister and I both experienced ASMR from a young age, and we were among the lots of people who say things like, this is something I felt my whole life, but I didn't know there was a name for it. Or this is something I felt my whole life, but I never wanted to tell anyone about it because I was afraid they would think I was weird. Or I felt this my whole life and I just assumed everyone did. I didn't know that only some people experience this. Uh,
Do you
So
think it's a lot of people, or would you say it's like kind of rare?
I would say this is a guess that's based on not much at all. I would guess maybe 5 to 10% of the population, just based on me meeting people and asking them about it. As far as it being, it's not super common to run into people who are like, oh yeah, I have that. Um, but it's not crazy rare either. So a lot of people will these days, if I bring up ASMR, will either say that they, uh, even if they don't experience it themselves, they might have a friend or a sibling or a partner or someone they know who watches those videos. So people are at least more familiar with it now, even if they don't experience it themselves.
I've talked to several people about ASMR just in conversation, and people
Mm-hmm.
think that it's like a inherently like a sexual thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that in your experience? Is it mostly that for people, or is it like a matter of relaxation?
It's kind of like a lot of other art forms. You can compare it to like photography, for instance, where photography isn't inherently sexual, but there absolutely is a whole subgenre of like erotic photography, um, or even, explicit photography. So ASMR is kind of the same in that ASMR itself isn't sexual. I refer to it as actually a pre sexual feeling because for me and for a lot of people, the first time we remember experiencing it is usually as a child before you even have an inkling of sexual feeling. It's just very cozy and comfortable. But because ASMR tends to have a lot of soft speaking and a lot of touching and personal attention and things like that, things that we equate with intimacy, there can be that overlap where people might watch it and feel uncomfortable because it seems too close or too familiar. Um,
I've heard people say that they can't even give it a chance because they just feel like it's
yeah,
too like that.
yeah. I mean, I think it's similar to how like some people love hugs. They're huggers. They meet someone, they want to give them a hug. That's just how they feel and express affection. And then there are plenty of people who are like, please do not touch me ever. It's sort of like a comfort level thing. So ASMR videos, most of them do have some level of familiarity or intimacy that's just uncomfortable for a lot of people, but is a joy for others. So it's just one of those personal comfort level things.
So let's go back. Your sister introduces
Yes.
ASMR to you.
Hmm.
Why? Just because you guys had talked about it in the past and now you have finally had a name for it, or how did that kind of come
Yeah,
about?
it's something we talked about in the past, and we would sometimes share stories. We identified certain things as like giving us that feeling that you realize later are sort of primary ASMR experiences for people all over the world. Like there's this scene in the movie Edward Scissorhands where there's like a makeup application happening and she's talking really, really softly. And my sister and I would talk about like, oh, that scene, it's like so good. Or my sister and I would both listen to certain types of guided meditations, stuff like that, stuff that people used to get that ASMR feeling. Um, a lot of people watch would watch Bob Ross and get the feeling. He's considered sort of a grandfather of unintentional ASMR in that
Yeah.
sense. Um, or even a common experience for a lot of people is the feeling they get if they get a haircut or getting their hair washed. Or for a lot of people, especially um, young women, have experience of being in school, playing with each other's hair and that like good kind of tingly feeling you'd get from that. So those are all the types of experiences that my sister and I connected over where it was like, you get that feeling, I get it too. And I live in Austin, Texas. She lives back where I grew up in Massachusetts. And she had come down to visit shortly after my first child was born. And I was dealing with a lot of anxiety and insomnia when he was a baby. And she was so excited. She was like, that feeling that we both get? There is a name for it. And people are making videos on YouTube specifically to give you that feeling. And she started showing me some of these videos, and I was into it right away. So pretty much from that moment, I started watching them every night to help myself fall asleep.
Do you have any particular channels that you're like a super fan of, or do you just have a lot of them?
I have a lot of them. The style has changed so much over the years. It's like any art form where as it grows, you get more genres and subgenres and styles and techniques and stuff like that. And it tends to be a very particular thing for people. So for me, a lot of my go to ASMR videos are actually older ones because I think
Nostalgia.
a lot of older ASMR videos also just kind of had a style that was a little more raw. And it's interesting because ASMR videos are supposed to be, or the role plays anyway, that's like a major genre within ASMR. Um, they're supposed to be immersive and make you feel like you're there with the person. And these days, so many people who make ASMR have really high production quality with their
Yeah.
editing and their lights and their cameras and everything. And interestingly, I have found that stuff that is a little rougher, or people use the phrase lo-fi, um, for me actually feels more comforting and more immersive because I find that the higher quality stuff, it more feels like I'm watching a movie. And there are
Yeah.
some incredible channels out there. You know, Moonlight Cottage is a great example. Atlas ASMR, like these are both a couple of people who are known for having really high production quality. Uh, Atmosphere, I think her name is another one who's a great example. And they make incredible, brilliant, beautiful, technically well done videos that they put a ton of artistry into. And I admire the heck out of them. I love seeing them and appreciating how good they are, but they also don't trigger my ASMR in the way that the more lo-fi ones do for some reason. So a lot of my favorites are videos that are like 5, 8, 10 years old or older. There's actually not a ton of newer content that I enjoy as much as the older stuff.
What do you think about the people on like TikTok and all this that are using ASMR, but they're doing like really wild stuff? Like they're just eating like a fish head or like something just completely ridiculous and just kind of to get views, I guess, because it's so
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous.
Um, I mean, I think I try really hard not to be gatekeepy about
Yeah.
ASMR, and I hope most people won't.
You're like,
But
have fun, eat your fish head.
yeah, like I think this is something I think a lot of us identified from fairly early on as ASMR grew and grew and grew, is there is something that you lose when something grows and becomes more popular and more mainstream like that. You lose that sort of intimate, only a few people know about this. I'm part of a
Yeah.
small
The cult
group. Or,
following.
exactly. Like you lose that. And like I remember back when I first started watching ASMR videos, I don't think there were many more than maybe 100 and 150 people in the whole world who were making them. And I knew just about all of them, if not all of them. Like if I saw a channel name, I would at least recognize it. Whereas now I don't know how many people are making ASMR content now.
There's a lot.
Yeah, it has to be, I'm sure it's tens of thousands, if not more.
But people
Um,
people like it. Like I
yeah.
see all those videos get tons and tons of views.
hmm And I think what's happening with that as the audience and the creator base is growing is that there's just more and more nuance being found to how people experience ASMR and what it triggers for them. Like for a long time, it was sort of accepted that ASMR had to be whispered. And then people started doing soft spoken or normal voice ASMR. And there are lots of people that prefer that. I prefer soft spoken over whispered. Same thing with there's like fast and aggressive ASMR videos now. And for the first, I don't know if it was like first decade or so of ASMR, it was sort of accepted that ASMR videos had to be very slow, very gentle, very soft. And now you get videos from people who are like moving super fast and getting in and out. And um, for a lot of people, just because different people's brains work differently. That kind of fast, intense, surprising movement can sort of captivate their brain more. I see a lot of people with ADHD who prefer the sort of fast and
That makes
aggressive
sense.
videos because that's what'll their brain will be able to latch onto without like wandering off.
That's really interesting. This is all just really interesting. I want to ask about in that vein of just how it's grown is how did the perception of I guess the people around you, I mean eventually you had to tell people that you were doing this, right? So how has the perception changed from when you started doing it to now? Like do you feel like people are more accepting and understanding of it now, or how has that kind of played out for you?
So I think I was really open about it pretty much right from when I started, just because that's my personality. Like I have a background in performance. I've got a BA in theater performance in my 20s, and I think anyone who knows me or cared about me at that time knew me to be someone who did weird stuff that was kind of out there. So for me, there wasn't really any pressure to hide it. It was very much in keeping with my brand, I guess, of like, I'm doing another weird thing. Um, but
I love that.
I knew a lot of other creators in the community who didn't have that luxury, who had families who sort of expected them to be more conservative or just weren't in sort of an artistic community to the extent that I was at that time. So I absolutely knew people who felt like they couldn't show their face on camera or were super, super protective about their real names or, had anxiety all the time about someone they knew maybe stumbling across one of their videos. Uh, Whereas I think that's much less of a thing now because there's kind of two things that happened. There's, ASMR has become more mainstream and something that a lot more people are at least familiar with. And since they've at least heard of
Yeah, they
it,
just know what it is, so it's
yeah.
less weird to them.
And then I think just as importantly, being a YouTube content creator as a job, like, is also just much more of an accepted thing now than it was a decade ago. I remember around the time I started making YouTube videos, occasionally seeing articles online that were about people making, you know, six figures on YouTube. And at that time, there was like a lot of
People were shocked.
people were resentful and outraged and didn't really have an understanding of what goes into content creation and all the work that goes into it. Like I
They
remember
thought it
this
was
one
easy.
exactly. They'd be like, "What? These people just sit in front of a camera and talk about makeup and they make all this money?" And it
It's
was
a lot of work.
interesting. Yeah, it
It's
was sort
probably
of
more
like,
work than a lot of jobs, honestly.
yes, yeah. I mean, for every like 10 minutes you see a video, there's probably at least,
Hours.
yeah, 2 to 5 hours,
And the
depending on.
planning. You're like
Hmm.
if you're a makeup person, you're like, okay, what makeup is relevant right now? Like what
Hmm.
brands are just really like all the research involved too.
All the investment in buying like products and equipment. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. And early on, and just about any article you saw where people talked about people making good money on YouTube, it was kind of presented as like outrage bait for
Yeah.
people to get mad over. Whereas now it's a relatively accepted just job for people to have. It's a lot more normalized now. And I think that being the case has also made it a lot easier for people who make ASMR to just slide into a conversation and be like, "Oh, I make YouTube videos for my job." People now are much more likely to be like, "Oh, okay, that's
Oh, now they're
cool.
probably like, "Oh, that's great."
Yeah, yeah, living the dream."
um cool. So, let's run through your job timeline.
Okay.
Okay, cuz you mentioned that before doing the ASMR, you weren't really finding like the right fit, but what were you doing? What were you trying?
Oh, like
Like after school, like for work, like what were you doing? So you graduate from theater. You said you got a theater degree.
yeah, so
What'd you do
I
right after that?
I was very all over the place in the years leading up to starting YouTube. Because I graduated from high school, I went to college. It took me like 8 years to get a 4-year degree because I kept dropping out and changing my major and changing it back. I knew that I loved theater. I loved performing. Um, that was kind of my ideal. I knew I wanted to be able to do a job that I loved doing. And that was more my concern than doing a job that would be stable or be likely to make a really good income. So I had
I
settled
like
on
that.
acting
It's a good
because,
mindset.
yeah, because I also just know myself and I know that I don't function well having to do things over a long period of time that I'm not genuinely invested in. Like I have to genuinely care about it or I'm just not going to last. And that was something that I struggled with for a long time, trying to get normal jobs and
Did you go to school in
self-destructing.
Massachusetts or did you go to
Yes.
school in Okay.
Yeah, I went
How'd
to
you end up in
school.
Austin?
Um, my husband at the time and I, neither of us had lived outside of Massachusetts at that point and had kind of always wanted that experience. And we also both kind of recognized that we were at a unique point in our life because we had both, in recent years, graduated from college. We were married. We didn't have any kids yet. And we sort of looked around and realized, like, if we ever want to try moving somewhere else, this is the time to do it. So we um, wanted to find a place that would be, in some ways, sort of culturally similar to the North Shore, Massachusetts college city that we had been living in for the decade leading up to that. But we also wanted the experience of a place that was going to be really different, too, in a lot of ways. So
It's warmer.
um, it's warmer. Yeah, getting away from. I had had enough winters of, stepping outside and my nose hairs freezing in my nostrils within 5 seconds. I'm not
I did
a.
not experience that, but I did live in Seattle for 1 year and I
Mm-hmm.
experienced the rain and the cold and I was like, "Nope, I'm out." And I
Yeah.
moved to Austin.
Yeah, and the heat is tough down here, but for me, it's that if I'm overly hot, the worst that happens is I'm just kind of like
You
grumpy
just go
and
inside.
sweaty, whereas if I'm cold all the time, I just want to curl up in a ball and not function for 6 months. So
Yeah.
this is,
That's what I say. I would rather, at least in Washington state, the bad weather lasts like 8 months and I'm like, I'd rather 2 months of suffering than
Mhm.
8 months of darkness.
Yes, yeah, and yeah, at the time, it's unfortunately changed a lot, but at the time we moved here, Austin was way more affordable than where we were living in Massachusetts. Um,
Keep Austin weird.
yeah, keep Austin weird. So it had enough of that like weird artistic vibe that we thought we could dive into that and enjoy that. But this is also, the climate is obviously extremely different. There's a lot about the culture that's very different. Moving from a very blue
Techies.
state to a very red state. There's a lot about it that it was that right balance of familiar and different that appealed to us. And for the most part, I've been really happy here.
Would you do you see yourself going back to
Um, I there's a part of me that would really love to go back to New England. There's so much I miss about it,
I've
and
never been there, so I have no idea what it's like.
it's just beautiful. Just the trees and the seasons, and there's like a warm quaintness to New England that is hard to find anywhere else. I also love the experience of, I went on a lot of road trips as a kid and when I got older and was out on my own, but I love that if you're in New England, you can go for an 8-hour drive and pass through like 6 states. Whereas if you're in Austin, you drive 8 hours in any direction and you are still in
That's true.
Texas.
I
So I miss
I
that too.
drove from Washington to
Oh, wow.
Austin,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a lot of nothing for
Mm-hmm.
a really long time.
Yep.
But it did make me appreciate how big the US was. I was
Yes.
like, you could just go disappear at one of these little towns. Like,
Mm-hmm. That
so
one.
we were in Massachusetts. We got
Mm.
our degree in theater, and then we ended up here in Austin
Hmm.
just because we thought it was the right fit.
Yes. So got down here to Austin. Um,
One more question actually is like
yeah.
when you got the theater degree and everything, I guess like did you not feel drawn to New York or LA given that that might have been like a good like a good spot for theater?
By the time I finally graduated with my theater degree, I kind of had a sense that I wasn't going to go that route, that it wasn't necessarily going to be right for me for a variety of reasons. It was more something where I just needed to graduate college, and that's what I had the most credits in.
Yeah.
um, but I think I kind of always knew that I was unlikely to wind up in New York. I was slightly more interested in LA, but um, I've just never been like I love visiting big cities, but I've never really pictured myself living in a big city. Like Austin isn't really, it's growing, but
I
Austin
would say it's
is,
like
yeah.
middle sized,
Hmm.
medium sized.
Yeah. And yeah, Austin has that feeling of there is a downtown, but you don't have to go very far to feel like you're in a more suburban area. So,
Which
I,
I really like that, but
mhm.
I'm kind of like a boring person to be honest.
I just like, I like trees. So,
Like I do know a lot of people who moved to New York, and I sympathize with the reason that they're like, oh well, I just want to be somewhere where like something's happening at all
mhm.
times, and I'm like, I can see that being enjoyable, but like I don't want to hear anybody. I
No.
just I just want to go to my little bubble and just
Mhm. Yeah, I like being able to access. That's why Austin has been a really good balance for me. I like having access to that kind of thing. There's so much to do around here, especially I have 3 kids and there's a ton of stuff for kids around here. But I also like being able to withdraw and be in an area that feels a little more quiet and I can enjoy a little more solitude and yeah.
yeah, I agree. So I guess did you move here with like a job already set up, or you just kind of showed up and you're like, we'll see what
Yeah,
happens?
kind of like I had been working prior to moving to Austin. I had been working doing the like 60 plus hour a week thing with working at a um, seafood restaurant in Peabody, Massachusetts. And I was also working at a Starbucks in Salem, Massachusetts. So my plan had been to transfer to a Starbucks down here, just to get me started and to also have health insurance. And that wound up falling through. I wound up getting a job with a at a call center at an insurance company, and I was there for maybe a year or so. I'm not sure. That's the closest thing I've ever had to like a real conventional office job with like cubicles and computers and things like that. And it was okay for a while, but I just wasn't doing great with it. And I got pregnant while I was working there, and it wound up being a really challenging pregnancy. And it was just really difficult to keep up with the quality and the pace of my work with
Yeah.
how sick I was. So I actually wound up losing that job. My husband at the time and I both worked there, and we were both let go when I was like 7 months pregnant.
What
So
year was this?
this would have been late 2011, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, because my son was born in 2012. So it was late 2011. We were let go. We didn't know what we were going to do. And for a while after that, we both did some different types of like freelance type stuff. I had uh, one of my favorite part time jobs I've ever had where I was doing uh, proofreading of ebooks. So it was this company that bought up um, books that had where the what's the word I'm looking for, the copyright or whatever had expired. So they bought them up. They had a machine that would like scan the pages and convert it to an ebook, and they just needed people to sit at a computer and go through the PDF of the book that was scanned to the Word document and just fix any errors because there would be a lot of errors in the scanning. So being able to read books for pay was really great. but it
What
also
was the
wasn't.
what was the pay like on a job like that? I've never heard of a job like that.
I can't remember. It wasn't great, but it was better than nothing. The problem is just
You couldn't bump up your hours.
you could only do so much. Like they would only give you so much each week or every 2 week period. And over the time period that I was doing that was like a year and a half, 2 years. I think the technology just kept improving to the point where there wasn't as much work, or they didn't need people as much, to the point where they just started phasing us out. I did some other work from home stuff for a while, and that brought me right up to starting my YouTube channel.
Okay. And then how long between starting the YouTube channel and then actually making money off of the YouTube channel? What was the timeline with that? And then were you doing it like little side jobs to try to supplement that you were trying to do the YouTube channel at the same time, or how did
Yeah.
that pan out?
So there was overlap for a while. I was doing I forget the name of the company. It was like reviewing results that helped some like search engine algorithm or something like that. It wasn't terribly exciting, but I was a single mom at that point. So it was single mom without a car. So it was convenient for that. And I was doing that around the same time I started doing YouTube. And it's interesting because I forget exactly. It was within the first few months that I started, that I monetized my channel. Because generally,
Oh.
when you first start a YouTube channel, for those who aren't aware, when you first start a YouTube channel, you're not automatically making money off of it. You have to like go through a process, click a box, set things up to be able to earn money. And
Well, now you need to meet a bunch of prerequisites, but I think in
mhm,
like that era, which like
back then, it
2011,
was just like basically, yes, I want to.
I think you
Anyone
just
could.
had to have like a social security number, and they're like, great.
Hmm. Perfect. Yeah, we want you. Um, and it's interesting to think back because at the time there was actually some controversy over whether or not people would monetize their channel, um, which seems almost silly now to some extent. But there were a lot of people who would be like, I only do this for love. I wouldn't feel right making money off of it, which is great. But I back then, just culturally, it was so different how we think about and use YouTube as creators. But I remember I felt like I initially went into it with this idea that I was like, well, I have to get my channel kind of big. I felt like I had to get to a certain point or like feel like I earned it before I started making money off my videos. But another content creator encouraged me to just start. So I did. And trying to remember how many months in it was. A few months into doing YouTube, I lost that work from home job that I was doing. And so it was kind of like dropped in my lap, in the sense that I was like, do I want to just start doing YouTube as my primary full time job? So I took the leap, and instead of looking for another supplementary income, I decided I was going to turn my attention to YouTube, make that my primary job. And I was just very lucky in that it worked out for me.
I love that losing the job kind of made you double down.
Yeah.
What um what would you say subscriber wise, like how many views were you getting at the time? Like I know that things have changed a lot, so
Hmm.
the money might not have been the same, etc. But just give or take, like how many subscribers did you have at the time? Like where were you at?
I don't remember the exact numbers. I do know that my YouTube experience as a creator has been pretty unique in that if you look at my like subscriber gains and my view gains over the lifetime of my channel, it's a very steady line. I pretty reliably with for like the entirety of my almost a decade on YouTube have been getting between maybe like 1,700 and 1,500 new subscribers every month. It's been very um,
Steady.
steady growth. Yeah. So which is actually kind of nice because that's one of the hardest things about being a YouTube content creator that I see with a lot of other people is that their numbers are like all over the place, and it can
Yeah,
be
because you'll have like one video go viral and then like that'll
mhm.
bring in a bunch of people, but then the next month you don't have that anymore. So
Yeah, and it's not always clear because it'll be like, "Oh, this one did really well, so that's what people want. I'm gonna make more videos like that." And then other videos like that don't necessarily perform as well for some reason, and
I think it's the algorithm, like
mhm,
the which I wanted to touch on. Like I'm probably a little bit younger than you, so I've grown up with YouTube. Like
mhm,
that's been like my main source of entertainment the
mhm,
entire time. So I have seen like all of these different phases, and I recognize what you were saying about it felt like people were just authentically posting and
mhm,
they weren't editing as much. They were just and that was what attracted me to YouTube in the first place was just normal people putting a camera in front of them and talking
mhm,
and kind of showing their like lives compared to, you know, watching a super catered TV show where everything
mhm.
is like so polished.
Yeah.
So that was really appealing about it. And then I feel like all that has shifted now where you're kind of just having to do what the algorithm wants,
Mhm,
which is basically like a super catchy thumbnail. If your thumbnail is not super catchy,
mhm,
then that's it, your video goes in the trash. Like so the first gatekeep is the thumbnail. The
mhm,
second gatekeep is if like the first 30 seconds are not the most entertaining 30 seconds you've made in your entire life, then the algorithm takes your video and throws it in the trash.
mhm,
And then past that, if like the retention is just not good enough, trash. And then the other thing that the algorithm's doing now, which I find a little bit upsetting, is that they take the video. It might not be the same for you because you already have a built-in audience. So
mhm,
like the people that are watching are already interested in your content. But if you're starting from scratch right now, what the algorithm seems to be doing is that it suggests the video to people that they think would want to watch the video.
mhm,
And if that group of people react negatively to it, the
mm,
video goes in the trash.
mhm.
And if so what and then if what they do is like if that group of people reacted positively, they move to a bigger group and a bigger group and a bigger group.
Yeah.
But then and then so that's why you have I feel like you have more of these waves now because you just have a video explode and then the next one it just didn't get recommended to the right people and that you're in the trash now basically.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I feel fortunate as a creator because there's kind of like this YouTube dream of like getting these huge numbers. And I have never really had that kind of explosive growth that a lot of channels hope for. Mine's been very steady. Um, so, on the one hand, of course, that's the dream of pretty much every professional YouTuber is to get that explosive growth, those really big numbers. But mine pretty much the whole time has been relatively stable and predictable, which is rare in the YouTube world. But as someone, who has 3 kids and needs to have as predictable an income as possible, that's been really helpful. But the whole
That's why I
algorithm thing
liked
is
being able to
sorry,
talk
go
to you
ahead.
is because that's what I why I liked being able to talk to you because I like that your story is different that you kind of have just had this consistent channel for over 10
Hmm.
years and like when you see somebody that's like oh I've been doing YouTube for 10 years their channel has been like this and then maybe right now they have no views because the people that are watching them 10 years ago are now adults and they're not interested in the same content. So it's
Yeah, and
really
I
interesting that you've been able to keep like a steady flow.
yeah, that's something I see within my own genre a lot is there will be people who were some of the top people in ASMR a few years ago who now aren't doing their numbers are maybe like 10% of what they used to be. And that's always the fear people worry about their channel dying. And the whole algorithm thing is so tricky because the algorithm changes all the
It's a
time.
game.
People don't really and there's no it reminds me a lot of people playing the stock market where there's a
Yes.
ton of advice out there. There's so much advice out there of like how to hit it big and like how to do well with it. But the more you follow it and the more you read and the more you try, the more you realize like no one really knows. Like there are entire YouTube channels dedicated to how to grow your YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And even those like I don't know, there are Reddit, there are like subreddits dedicated to it. There are so many resources out there that are like how to make the algorithm work for you. And my personal experience over the past 9+ years has just been that you can get some good tips, some sort of best practices for it, but that there's, in my experience, just no real reliable way to like make it happen. You can set yourself up better for it to happen, but it just at somewhere along the line, I was like, I need to just, because for people who don't make content on YouTube, if you go into your content creator account on YouTube, there are just these pages and pages of analytics and information and data for analyzing your audience and what they're watching and what parts of your video they like, how many people are clicking on your video versus passing on it, country, age, all interests, things like that. Like I have a high percentage of audience members who I know are like gamers and who like heavy metal music, like things like that.
Yeah.
And it's
Which it
helpful.
helps you come up with ideas because maybe
Mm-hmm.
if you know that people are that you have gamers, and you're like, oh, I could make a like a gaming video.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so it is information that you can use and get yourself better set up, but there's, in my experience, just no surefire way to make the algorithm work for you.
What do you think of somebody like Mr. Beast, who, in my opinion, like, I mean, he's somewhat charismatic and stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
what I think really is that he's a master of the current algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it seems to me like it's a game, and then the people who get to the top are the ones that know how to play the game.
Yeah, I don't know how I'm not super familiar with him, and I don't know how he started. I'm a little bit familiar with him in
He
recent
talks about
years.
how all he did was analyze
Yeah.
the algorithm, basically.
Hmm. But I mean, also now he's so wealthy, and he is,
He has a huge
if you
team.
look at his videos, like he does these big, expensive, wild scenarios, like the Squid Game thing he did. Paying for like 100 people's surgery. Like he does these things that cost a ton of money. So he's, in that position where he can take a lot of his income and invest it back into the channel and keep growing it that way.
At first, though,
Um,
I think he started with like the first Mr. Beast video that I saw,
mhm.
like before he had these big budgets, was him, like just like being in a pool for 24 hours, like,
Yeah, well, I
like
noticed that because I was looking at his channel recently. I have a 11-year-old son who watches a fair amount of YouTube. So
it's
we,
definitely good to study him. I feel like even if
yeah.
you don't love the content, it's just so to me really fascinating
Hmm.
how to he's like a master of the algorithm is what I think
Hmm.
he is.
Yeah, and I was looking at his top videos actually recently with my son, and I noticed that a lot of the videos involve opportunities for like everyday people to win a lot of money. Like stay inside the be the last one standing
Yeah,
inside the circle, win $50,000 or whatever it is. And I think
everybody
there's
loves money.
something, yeah, I think there's this really appealing idea. It's like those people.
Game shows.
I'm not on Twitter anymore. All set with that. But like I would see there were certain Twitter accounts that would be like, I'm going to give one person who retweets this $1,000, like something like that. And people go nuts with it. There's that fantasy of being able to have this big cash windfall for something fairly simple. And I think it seems like MrBeast does a good job selling that. Uh, so again, I'm not super familiar with his career or how he got to this point, but yeah, it seems like there's something about his videos that I've seen that makes, I think, appeals to people in the sense that they feel like that could be me. That could be me winning the money or playing in that game or something like that. And I think that adds a really strong element of interest to those videos.
Yeah, I agree. So let's go back to now you're making YouTube your full-time income.
Hmm.
You're well, I guess kind of a stay-at-home mom, but not really, because yeah,
Yeah, because I do stay at home. But,
yeah.
but yeah, so that's the other thing is,
And how much would you say that you're making at this point where you're like, okay, I'm good. Like, this could be my full-time income.
yeah, so, well, I mean, my income is kind of supplemented by the fact that, um, I have 3 children with 2 different ex-partners.
Yeah.
So, and they're good dads who help out financially.
Yeah.
So, expenses for my kids are partially covered that way. And then I am currently in a relationship. So my current partner also helps, with a lot of our shared expenses. But it's this really interesting thing where I think so I'm making probably in the neighborhood of around $40,000 a year, which I think for some people might not sound that exciting because again, there's this YouTube dream of making six figures.
Yeah, but you're getting the consistency of being able to do that for years.
Exactly. Yeah, that was an early goal of mine. I think, but yeah, and if I take it put it in the context of I am a mom, I have 3 kids,
You don't have a boss.
two, yeah, I don't have a boss.
Somewhat, I guess. So you could consider
Mhm.
YouTube your boss. They could
Yeah.
just fire you if they want to.
My audience is my boss. Um, but I have in my circumstances where, I do have that theater degree. I briefly was going into nursing. I did like a whole pre-nursing education. But just with my education and skill level, with my circumstances of having 3 children, 2 of whom have disabilities, which can make our schedule really unpredictable based on their needs or what's going on with them. If YouTube disappeared tomorrow and I had to get another job, I cannot imagine what I could do that would have the flexibility that YouTube has for me, um, the the creative satisfaction, and it. I'm probably putting in maybe 20 to 25 hours a week. So being able to make that amount of money with the incredible flexibility that YouTube offers me, I try not to, but if it comes down to it and something's going on, like I can take a week off of work and I'm still getting income. So
Yeah.
it's not the crazy wealth success story that a lot of people like to hear about from YouTube. But for my situation, it really is a dream job as far as being able to have something that's so flexible, so creatively satisfying. And yeah, and that's fairly reliable and fairly consistent.
So if YouTube was to just disappear, like
Hmm.
social media just disappeared tomorrow, I guess what have you thought about what you would try to do, or you just are
I've thought
like, I
about
have
it.
no idea?
I've thought about it a bunch of times and I haven't really come up with anything. I'm really not sure what I would do.
Because
So,
my initial thought when you said if YouTube disappeared, I'm like, well, just switch over to TikTok. Like,
yeah,
but I'm saying if all social media disappeared.
if I couldn't make ASMR videos for income anymore, uh, I don't know. I think I would have to come up with something pretty creative because there's just not a lot of conventional opportunities out there for someone like me to be
Your
able to make a
resume just says
meaningful.
ASMR 10
Yeah.
years.
Hmm.
Like,
Exactly.
that's awesome. Um, so do you, where do you go from here? Do you have like any aspirations to, I guess, grow on the channel? Like, are you trying to follow any trends? Maybe do a course? Like, what kind of stuff where do you want to go from here?
I would love to grow with it. I would love to um, grow my audience with my ASMR channel. I would love it if circumstances changed in such a way that I could bump up my income enough to justify having other people paid on my team to pick up some of the stuff that I don't enjoy doing so much.
What
I
don't
would
you enjoy doing?
um I'm like I don't mind the editing. I would love it if I didn't have to edit my own videos for the most part. I just really love I'm kind of that stereotypical artist type where I love doing the creative stuff. I don't really like doing the business end of things as far as studying the analytics or trying to figure out trends or best practices or negotiating with sponsors or figuring out merch or any of those other things. I wish I could hire someone to do help out with my social media stuff. Like those are all things that like I like going on social media and being able to connect with viewers occasionally, like that's really nice, but I'm not like a social media person where I can post every day and know the right types of photos and the right types of captions and things like that that are going to get people's interest. Uh, Anything outside of create, like I love coming up with ideas. I love scripting them. I love figuring out the practical aspects of how am I going to make this sound or how am I going to set this up to be a convincing environment. What props am I going to use? I love figuring out the little cheats and strategies to make it work better or be more realistic. I like the performance part of it. Those are all things that I really enjoy, and I wish I could focus more on that end of things and not have to spend so much time doing the stuff that's just not that interesting or satisfying for me.
In that vein, how do you come up with ideas? Because I've looked at your channel and it seems like a lot of role play stuff, right? Which
Hmm.
in my mind, I would have to sit there and like really think about like scenarios and how do you or are you just inspired by your like everyday life? Like you went and got a haircut and you're like, oh, that's a great idea, or like how do you come up with ideas? Do you follow the analytics? Like, what do you do?
I'm not much one to be like, oh, this is really trending in ASMR, so I need to do one. Just because my personal experience is that I don't think that's necessarily me or my like fits with my channel. Um, it's not even like like I'm too good for trends. It's just that when I've tried to do those trends, I don't necessarily see a lot of success from it.
Yeah.
Um, and I coming up with ideas for videos is probably the easiest thing for me. Um, I'm still a regular ASMR viewer, so one of the top ways that I come up with ideas is um, if I'm scrolling through videos and I'm wanting something kind of specific or a specific combination of things that I can't find, I'll just be like, well, I'll be the one to make that type of video. I'll be the one to do the sci-fi psychiatric experiment or something like that. Uh, and then it's a lot of backwards engineering too, where I like one of the things that are really successful for me on my channel that's like a signature thing for me is ears, like using a otoscope and the sounds it makes if you put an otoscope in the ears of my microphone, because I have one of those 3DO microphones that has like the silicone ears on the outside. Um, so I just try and come up with creative, like, how can I come up with an interesting reason to be going into someone's ears? And because my channel a lot of times has a little bit of like a silly or whimsical or tongue in cheek quality to it, I can get kind of out there. Like I can have a sci-fi video where we're doing bionic implants in your ears. I can do a dystopian post-apocalyptic video where um, you know me and the viewer are the last two people on earth, and in my former life I had a passion for ear exams or something, just like I
Are
really
you a
like
gamer?
getting A little bit. I was a lot more before I had kids. I haven't been as much the past 12 years or so.
Oh, okay, because looking at your channel, I kind of felt like maybe you were inspired by video games, but
A little bit. I mean, I like that's I guess the type of video game I like to like. I love RPG type stuff, especially, more open world. I love the Elder Scrolls games,
yep.
the Red Dead Redemption games.
Red
Uh,
Dead Redemption is like Red Dead Redemption 2, in my opinion, is like one of the best games ever made.
mhm. Yeah, so I love the way back in the day when I was in college, I used to play EverQuest. So I really like those types of games, and it's absolutely a creative influence for me. I'm just not the type of gamer who is very good at, like, oh, I'll just play 30 minutes of this, or I'm just going to play for an hour.
You get
Um,
like really sucked in.
yeah, the way my ADHD manifests is that I will sit down to play a game, and it'll be 8 hours later, and I haven't eaten or gone to the bathroom, and I'm just like, can't stop. So, unfortunately, that hasn't been as big a part of my life. But I did actually recently get
Use your kids
an
as an excuse.
Xbox. Yeah. Well, that's exactly. I have an Xbox that I just got within the past few months, and it's been really great to play games some more myself, but also to be able to play games with my kids, either watching them play games, taking turns. It's become a good uh, bonding sort of activity as much as something I enjoy doing solo as well.
When you mentioned that you're currently making 40,000, just for clarity, is
Hmm.
that just on YouTube AdSense, or is that the everything sponsorships, maybe like TikTok? Because are
That's
you are you
I'm not
monetized on
monetized.
TikTok?
I'm not monetized on TikTok, and my understanding is that the monetization on TikTok isn't great. Like, I've seen people post how many views something got compared to how much it earned, and compared to what you can earn on YouTube, for example, it's way lower.
I guess just the
Um,
way you could look at it is like if you already made the content, like you're
mhm,
just repurposing it.
yeah. Yeah, for me, TikTok and my social media stuff is more about trying to find new audience to bring to my YouTube channel, or, just finding ways to connect with my YouTube audience outside of YouTube. Um, it's all sort of in support as YouTube as my primary platform. It's not really, none of that is really its own thing. Um, but that income is primarily comes from YouTube AdSense. And then I do Patreon as well. And for people who aren't familiar with that, it's very similar to like GoFundMe or Kickstarter, except it's a monthly thing. And it's a way that viewers can stay connected with you, commit to donating a certain amount each month, whether it's $1, $2, $5, $20. Um, so most of my income is YouTube, Patreon. I also do some sponsorships, and then there's some other little ways that the money comes in. I'm lucky to have a lot of viewers who will just occasionally send a cash donation. Every once in a while, I get an email that someone sent me $5, $20, sometimes larger amounts. Uh, and I
And you
think
don't want to like span out of YouTube, like streaming, or you just don't want to
um,
double down on TikTok. Like you don't want to just take your videos and chop them up and put them into shorts.
and I was doing that for a while, and I've been taking a break for that. So there are a lot of things that I would love to do. I would love to have more of a presence on TikTok. I would love to just be making more videos in general. I would love to be doing some custom stuff. There's a lot of stuff that I would like to be doing, but what I've found over the years is that because my time tends to be pretty limited, just with my kids and everything else going on, I only have so much time I can put into work. And I'm finding that I'm just getting the best return if I primarily focus on
Focus on
making
what's working.
good YouTube content.
Yeah.
And if I wind up with extra time on any given week, then I maybe poke into some of that extra stuff a little bit. But any time that I've tried to do more and spread myself out more, it has tended to hurt my YouTube output. So it's just not practical time wise right now to do more.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk about your audience.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the beginning, we were talking about how some people kind of have, uh, like, I guess I don't want to say negative, but they think of ASMR as something kind of weird.
Yeah.
Do you have, is your audience like people like you that they were having anxiety and all these things and it helps calm them down? Or do you get like kind of like creepy people in your DMs and stuff?
There is some of that. And over the course of my YouTube career, I've gotten some pretty atrocious, like probably felony level
I want to
stuff
change
that
my
people have sent to me.
address.
Yeah. Like I've gotten some really scary, bad, gross stuff over the years.
What do you do? Just delete it and try to not let it get to you?
If it's a situation where I can block the person or, set it aside, there are certain things that I will put like, if it's an email I get, I have like a specific folder that I move that stuff into just because like this sounds
This
really
is the
dramatic.
creep folder.
Yeah, well, some of this stuff borders on like I should hold on to this in case this ever becomes an issue where I need evidence. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so I like but again, that's like it's tough because it doesn't happen that often, but it's obviously impactful enough that it can be scary and unsettling. Um,
Have you
way
ever
more
had a
than that.
situation where somebody has tried to find you in real life or any of that? Or
Not that I'm aware of. Like, I definitely get sent some phishing stuff sometimes. Um, and I have gotten people who it's more common to get this more like mid range or, lower level stuff where it might be some, usually men, sending messages where they
yeah,
are sort of
men
like
tend to be.
where they're like asking for information or photos or even just expecting a certain level of conversation. Like I'll just get an email that's like, "Hey beautiful, I think you're so sexy. What are you up to today?" Like that's just not something I'm going to respond to for the most part. And
Yeah.
like some of these people will get really angry and mean if you don't respond the way you want them to. So that kind of stuff does happen. Um, it
What are the
sucks.
positive experiences?
So yeah, I
Are
think
there
that stuff that
people
I'm
that are
referring to
like,
is
your videos have changed my life? Like,
yes,
what?
yes. That's the I would say the good stuff is like 98% of the viewer interactions that I get. Um, I have an incredible audience. Like if you go through the comment sections of any of my videos on YouTube, it's I think incredibly striking how like kind and thoughtful and interesting these people are. I get a lot of feedback that's not just like great video, which I love too, but like I will get really thoughtful feedback from people talking about how the video affected them or how the video helped them or you know stuff they picked up about creative choices that I made, things like that. It's awesome. And um sorry, I forget where I was going with that.
Positive feedback.
But yeah, I do get a lot of people who take the time to write out, whether it's in a comment on one of my videos or they might message me on social media or email me telling me their stories of how ASMR in general or my videos specifically have helped them. And it's some really incredible stuff. Like I've had comments from people who are veterans who struggle with PTSD, and ASMR videos are the only way that they can calm down and fall asleep. I've gotten messages from people who have been through a grief process, like lost a parent to illness or something like that. And they've talked about how going through that time of like extreme distress and grief, ASMR videos are the only thing that calm them down and help them get sleep. Uh, this is a while back, but one of my favorite stories that just stuck with me. I'm very, very lucky in that I get a lot of these stories, but one of my favorites is this man some years back who told me that he had a job where he had to pass a yearly health screen for it. So he had gone in for his health screening, and I guess he was anxious, so his blood pressure was higher than it was allowed to be. And he was basically going to lose his job if he didn't pass this health screening. So the nurse or whoever was conducting it said, I'm going to let you go sit in a dark room for 15 minutes, like see if you can relax, calm down, get your blood pressure down so I can pass you. And he said he went into another room, watched one of my videos for 15 minutes, and he was able to get his blood pressure down and keep his job. So that
That's
was really
awesome.
cool. Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, no, this is it's good to hear the positive stories for
Yeah.
sure.
For the most part, my viewers are just really, really good people. I feel that's one of the most rewarding parts of my job is being able to look at them and for all my other issues in life and the things I struggle with, and I can be pretty tough on myself being
Now
able to
you're
look
the
around.
person helping people because
Mm-hmm.
they
Yeah.
helped you at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And being able to say, like, these are the people that I've been able to gather in this place or like pull into my audience, and the just kindness and quality and coolness of all these people makes me feel like I did something right. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I love to hear that. It seems to me like you're pretty authentic with your content and you don't really chase trends or any of that. Do you
Mm-hmm.
find yourself ever feeling maybe like an anxiety or struggling with feeling like you need to follow trends, or maybe uploading a video and it doesn't perform as well, and kind of like everything we were talking about with the algorithm and thinking like, oh, I need to follow the algorithm, like what am I doing wrong? Like, do you feel a sense of that, or you're just trying to keep level headed?
Yeah, I would not be surprised if I learned that I had somehow cumulatively lost like 5 years off the end of my life worrying about YouTube and the algorithm and performance and what it means. And um, it's something I've had a lot of stress over the years. And I would say it's only been within the past year or so, maybe, that I feel like I've finally started to get on top of that and be a little more objective and not take everything so personally. But the way YouTube is designed, I feel like YouTube is kind of designed to make creators worry about that stuff. Um,
Yeah,
and
because you just won't eat if you're
mhm,
not
yeah,
if you're not performing, you're not gonna eat.
yeah, and it's yeah, especially people who like me who are doing it for their income. It's not. It's it can be very easy to say like, just make what you love and focus on making a good content, and your audience will find you. Um, but realistically, and I see other creators struggle with this all the time, that not everyone is lucky enough for a variety of reasons that if they just do what they love and focus on making good content, they're not necessarily going to get the numbers that they need. There are a lot of people who feel like they have to either trend chase or say, like, these are the 2 or 3 types of videos that I make that most reliably get high views. So I'm only going to make those types of videos from now on. And for some people, if their primary goal on YouTube is to make as much money as possible, and that's a totally valid goal, uh, then you're a little more, I think, beholden to do that kind of thing. Uh, but for me, and again, I watched ASMR videos for about 2.5 years before I started making them. So I had some time to observe how other people were doing it and their strategies and see which creators I admired and which creators I saw, maybe struggling with certain things. So I had time to think about how I wanted to do it. I was able to be fairly intentional right from the beginning. And this is always one of my top tips for content creators who are just starting out is to, right from the beginning, as best you can, create a list of your primary objectives or primary goals on YouTube. Like for me, they were, I had three, and it was to create content that is creatively satisfying. I wanted to have a good relationship with my audience, and I wanted it to be sustainable. And that sustainable thing is a huge thing for me because I knew that for me it was going to be, a marathon, not a sprint. I have a pretty complex background of mental health issues. So I knew that I probably wasn't going to be someone who could just go hard indefinitely. I knew that there probably would be things that I would struggle with or need to take breaks. And I knew that my goal was to be making these videos for as long as possible. I knew that burnout is a huge issue among content creators.
Yeah,
So
because
that
you're
was
doing
something.
everything yourself, so you're doing
Hmm.
like the job of like 5 people in one.
Yeah. So having those three things, there have been so many times over the years, I'd say like at least 2 or 3 times a year, I have to stop because I'm getting carried away with the wrong stuff. For what's the wrong stuff for me? And I can step back and be like, what I'm focusing my energy on is not in alignment with my three goals. So I can step back and be like, no, I want to make stuff that's, even if chasing trends or focusing on like the couple types of videos that I know that get the best types of views, I know that that's stuff that's going to make it not creatively satisfying. It's going to be stuff that's going to make it not sustainable because I'm not going to be. In some ways, it's an incredible luxury to be like, I am not going to do my job unless I find joy in it. Not a lot of people
Yeah.
can do that, but
Probably most people can't do that.
mhm. But I've kind of stayed committed to that because for me, it's about knowing who I am and how I work. And I had so much of my life before YouTube where I really beat myself up for not being able to work the way that I felt like I should. I, would beat myself up like, Lola, you need to suck it up and be a grown up, and you should be able to just like work doesn't have to be fun. You should be able to just get the thing done. And that's the reality for a lot of people. But again and again and again, as much as I tried or tried new medications or new strategies or new jobs, I just found that I wasn't able to be successful with anything I wasn't truly engaged in. Um, and somewhere along the line, like I'm 41 now, somewhere along the line, I just stopped trying so hard to change myself and said, okay, if this is me and if I can only sustain a job if I truly care about it, then that's what I have and that's what I'm with. And maybe I could make more money if I did something else. But that's just not a valid possibility for me because I know I'll flounder and be miserable and probably self-destruct in some way if I try and force myself into either doing another job or doing this job not in the way that aligns with my priorities.